everyone. This is Deborah Cat from Deborah Cat Coaching, and you are listening to the Better Sex Podcast, where we have unfiltered conversations about sex and relationship. The hope of these conversations is that we will inspire more love and better sex worldwide. Today, I'm excited to talk with Karen Brody. Karen Brody is a man coach and the best-selling author of Open Her, Activate 7 Masculine Powers to Arouse Your Woman's Love and Desire. Karen's passion is to awaken the hidden potential power in men to lead in life, in love, and to give them the keys for how to awaken a woman's heart and her desire. I'm so excited to talk with her today. And Karen, I'd love for you to go ahead and tell us your story in your words. How did you get here?
Hi, Deborah. Thanks so much for having me. You know, it's a challenge to tell the story of how I got here because it's sort of a meandering story. But in essence, you know, a lot of it was centered on my own wounding as a child and the difficult experiences I had with the men in my life and then sexual abuse as a child. So that sexual abuse left me with a whole lot of shame and, you know, kind of moved me in directions that weren't necessarily that great for me. And so I garnered more and more pain, you know, throughout my adolescence. By the time I was in my late 20s and I had plenty of experience with, you know, different relationships, I realized that I really wanted to heal the wound because it was really getting in the way of my having a healthy, deeply connected relationship with a man. And so I set out on a course to do that. And that involved reading, I don't know, maybe thousands of self-help books, going to therapy. I ultimately went back to school and got my master's degree in counseling psychology. Because the results that I was getting with my own wounding were so profound. I mean, I went from just having an extreme experience of shame sexually to really a place of bliss and connectedness. I knew in that moment that healing was possible and that it would ultimately be the path that I would walk concerning my work. So I started out working with men, women, couples, just sort of trying to sort out where I fit best. And over time, I started to realize that I fit better with men. But also, Deborah, in this, you know, moment of crisis in my life, I got a message from Spirit, and I didn't get messages from Spirit. So this was really unusual for me. And that message was that I was to work specifically with men. So I had a lot of fear in that because even though I'd done a lot of healing, I knew there was still stuff there with men, but I followed the guidance and it unfolded in such a beautiful way that all of the misconceptions that I had about men, all of the pain I had surrounding men, just very slowly over time disappeared. And I realized that not only was I doing good for men, but men were doing good for me. So that's essentially how I got into the work. And then after many years of coaching men and learning how to empower men in the way men want to be empowered, I wrote the book Open Her. And that in and of itself has been an incredible journey in terms of men telling me, wow, you know, you really hit on the things that I was feeling and needing. And then I have a new book coming out soon that is called Claiming the Sword. I imagine will be out in about 4 months. So that's the story of how I got here.
Thank you. I love that. And congratulations on, it sounds like coming from a very shut down, wounded place to an expanded and evolving place. I'm curious. I'm curious about so many different things, but you and I met at an event, and I walked away with the book Open Her. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about um, how that came about, and what for you were some of the high points.
You mean how the book was formulated?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I started to write the first draft of the book just based on everything I had learned about men and the ways that I had learned to empower men, because I made a lot of mistakes along the way. And I think this is common to women working with men. And so I wrote that first draft, and I wrote entirely too much. And then I started to work with a guy who was simply going to help me. He was going to represent men for me in my process. And he's a brilliant writer himself and has also worked in the relationship field. And he said to me at one point, what I'm seeing in this book that you have here that you may not recognize is you have a series of archetypes that are emerging. And I said, wow, you're right. And that moment was so inspiring because it helped me take what I had and organize it into the book that it is now.
Yeah, the archetypes are, what I love about the archetypes is the way that you talk about them, and a little bit, it's got a different lens than the more classic version of that. And one of the things that I really was impressed with is there's a way in which you talk about what men can expect from women, as well as what women expect from men. And there's a way in which, holding the boundaries and allowing men permission to, to actually have their boundaries. And when they don't feel respected, when they don't feel honored, that they don't continue down that line. Whereas I often see men's work being like, push through it, and just, if you're enough this, that, or the other thing, then she's going to react well for it. Whereas with your work, I really appreciate the way in which you bring boundaries in. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Thanks for noticing that. It's one of the things I love in my coaching is teaching men how to communicate boundaries, because boundaries equals strength, inner strength. And when men learn to express boundaries, what they're communicating to a woman is what matters to them and how they want to be related to. And why I feel that this is good for men and good for women is that men need to honor what they bring to the world, obviously. There's a lot of man shaming out there. And when men do that, it gives us women a sense of security. Strong men are needed in the world. And when we're relating with men that are strong, that are honoring of themselves, it gives us a sense of well-being. We need the masculine to be well for the feminine to also be well. So, I'm not clear exactly how these other teachers are teaching, but what's important for me is that not only men understand how to honor women and give them what they want, but first they learn how to honor themselves, because it's through that demonstration that women feel held and contained, all the things that we most want to feel from a masculine man.
Yeah, I want to really highlight this idea of men having their own, really being in contact with that, with what works for them and what doesn't. Because I feel like the story is that that women are told, you know, we just need to be in service. But I think there's also that underlying message for men as well. You're supposed to show up and protect. You're supposed to do this, that, you know, you're supposed to be the provider. And it's often at the expense of what's true and authentic for them. So I just really want to highlight the way in which you talk about having your own agency around your boundaries and how important that is. I feel like for me, I wasn't always that excited to hear a person's no. But what I realized is when somebody gives me a no, I actually know where they stand in the world and what is important to them. As you said, you know, it really highlights the important, what somebody values.
Exactly. I used to date men who were, I would say, more on the feminine side when I wasn't well, you know, within myself. And, you know, I loved that these particular guys in my life were yes men, essentially. You know, whatever you want to do, it's up to you, whatever makes you happy. And I thought I had, you know, hit a gold mine with that. And then, you know, over time, you know, I think of one particular relationship after we were together around 6 years, I started to confront him and say, I just want you to be honest with me, you know, but he had become so accustomed to saying what he thought I wanted to hear that he couldn't even be honest with me. And it was really hard. So yeah, I absolutely agree with you that honesty gives us a sense of security. You know, you may not like what a man has to say to you, but you know, if he's going to be honest with you, that's something you can trust and lean into.
Mm. Can you talk a little bit about how to, as you know, as the feminine, as a woman, how to come, you know, how to be in that place of hearing the no, even if it's not necessarily what you would choose, and how to really, you know, be with that no, or to respect that no.
Well, you know, I think sometimes it's hard for women to hear the no because they don't have respect for their partners. And you and I had talked about how we were going to touch on respect today because I think it's so important. For men, it's more important than love. So I also surveyed my community list, and men, you know, 99% of them said, yeah, respect is definitely more important than love, where for women, it's love. So if we don't respect a man, you know, we don't necessarily respect his opinions. So even if we're asking, you know, what he wants or what his preferences would be, we're only doing it as a sort of exercise. True respect comes from a place of knowing that this man is a powerful being unto himself, that he has opinions of his own, that checking in with him is, you know, an act of love. But a lot of women grew up the way I grew up, learning to disrespect men. You know, my mother and my grandmother had no respect for men, and they essentially told me men can't be trusted. So that, you know, that for me too was part of the wound that I needed to overcome, because the young idealist girl in me wanted to trust men fully, you know, without reservation. But I had these messages, you know, coming from the women in my family. And interestingly, women now, even women in their 20s that I talk to, have very little respect as a rule for men, just based on the jokes that they tell and the way they respond to the kind of work I do, right? They'll say, thank God you're there to help them, you know, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
When there isn't respect for a man, you know, ultimately he figures that out. And the damage of that is he stops listening to a woman. And a woman isn't able to hear that no. You know, she comes up against that no in a way that is unkind or disrespectful. For a man, respect is more important because it means that his woman sees him as a powerful person. And I think you know, Deborah, for men, how important that is. If a woman doesn't see her man as powerful, how can he hear her? Because he essentially then has to align with this negative view that she has of him. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And I'm kind of curious, can you describe what respect looks like and then contrast that with what a lack of respect would look like?
Mm-hmm. Well, interestingly, just a couple of months ago when I surveyed my community list, I got something like 150 responses. And men, I was surprised, Deborah. I was really surprised by this one thing. Many of the men told me that it has a lot to do with listening. So we think about, women complaining about men not really listening to them, right? But so many of the men said that it's in the listening that they sense whether they're respected. So women who don't respect men will often cut them off, argue with, their points of view, be somewhat harsh. But it's a woman who softly listens to a man, even when she disagrees with his opinions, that demonstrates to him that he's respected. So that was one of the biggies.
I'm hearing you say that. And I'm like, I do that with my own partner. It's like, there's times when I'm just like, wow, hearing you say that, I can see where I'm not, like, I'm looking for an answer and I'm looking for something in particular. And when I don't hear it, I don't always take the time to just take a couple breaths, get grounded, and turn towards him.
Exactly.
So, oh my goodness, I feel totally called out, and thank you for that.
Yeah, I love being surprised because I've worked with men for, I think it's 23 years. So I'm not often surprised. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, I'm constantly in a state of discovery, but surprise is sort of different. Surprise is bigger. That answer surprised me.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right that sometimes we're looking for a particular answer. So there isn't really an openness there. And when we don't hear what we want to hear, we go into the yeah, but, we go into an argumentative state with the man because we want him to express himself in the way we would express ourselves. So that was the number one biggie. Another one, which was a little bit surprising, was that men want to be asked and want their opinions considered, particularly when they're married to a woman. And it has to do with the things they're planning for their lives, whether with their family or socially. So a lot of the men that I work with tell me that their wives just take over, do everything, right? She decides who they hang out with, where they go, where they vacation, what they buy for the house. Sometimes they check in like, hey, what do you think of this? But they don't really want the man's opinion. They want agreement.
Mm-hmm.
They want him to say, yeah, love that couch, love those curtains. So this one was great too, Deborah, in that often the man, a lot of my clients will tell me, I would probably not care, right? But it shows respect when she checks in and asks, right?
Such a good reminder.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so a lack of respect in that area is, I've decided we're doing this. And if for some reason you object to that, it's because you're difficult, right? Men see that as disrespectful.
Mm-hmm.
Another big piece was wanting their contribution to be acknowledged and appreciated. So granted, the men I talk to have a skewed perspective because they're coming to me because they have difficulties in the relationship. So they are often feeling that the contribution they're making isn't being acknowledged. But I have a sense too, just based on my time in the world, my relationships with women, that women overlook this all too often because we come from a place of, well, if we're slightly challenging or if we're slightly critical, it encourages the man to be even better for us. And because we're passive by nature, we also have this bad habit of not asking for what we want directly or specifically, but sort of expecting it's going to happen and then being disappointed. I think that, women can contribute to their not getting what they want for these very habits that I'm talking about.
Yeah, so I often hear, and I see it with my clients a lot as well, it's like women aren't direct about what they want. And they often feel like they don't know how to ask for what they want. If they're too direct, they get into trouble. If they're not direct enough, they don't get heard. So I'm curious what you have found to be the most, the best way to ask a man for what you want.
Well, I'll preface this by saying that the best thing that I have ever learned as a woman in relationship to a man and as a coach is to ask directly for what I want. And I'll tell you that wasn't easy for me. I'm a woman. I'm naturally passive by nature. But it is the most important thing a woman can do. And the men tell me it demonstrates respect. So in the past, men used to say to me, why can't she just say what she wants? And they would be so frustrated and pissed off that women were so indirect. And they would say, women play games. So I started looking into that. What is that really about? I ask a lot of questions of the guys that I work with. So I'm constantly surveying where they're coming from. And they're telling me, like, she says one thing and means another, right? Mm-hmm. You've heard this before. Mm-hmm. And finally I came to the conclusion that women don't actually say one thing and mean another intentionally. It's not a game that they're playing. They do it by nature, right? Because of we're trained, we're by nature more passive, and then we're cultured also to be passive. Don't ask for things too directly, be accommodating, that sort of thing. But it's also our nature. Mm-hmm. And so I started to explain to men that no, it's that this is how we are, right? And men were less frustrated by that, but nonetheless, their wish is that we would be more direct and tell them what we want. So when women learn to do that in a gentle way, in a loving, respectful way, and say, here's what I'd really like, men respond to that with a lot of energy because they want to do good for the women they love. So if you say, I really want this, or I'd really love this, this would really excite me, it would make me so happy, the guy's on a mission actually to help you get that. But what more women do, and I was so guilty of this, is we lead with what's not working.
Right.
And we complain. Mm-hmm. You know what? We never go anywhere. We never do anything. You never clean the house, all these things. And our hope is in doing that and sounding that alarm that men are going to get motivated to get things done for us. The truth is it has the opposite effect because he's thinking, she doesn't respect me. Why? She's using a tone that's hard. She's criticizing me. She doesn't see my value. Why should I do anything for her?
Right. Yeah. When I learned the piece around it would make me happy if, that was a game changer because I'd been doing exactly what you said, where it was like I was starting with the complaint and expecting my partner to be activated by that. And one of the things that he said to me at one point was, I get so much criticism in the outside world. That's not what I want from my partner. And that that was a game changer for me. It was like, oh, wow, I had no idea. So I really appreciate, changing that the order around, if you will. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I love that gem that you got. It gets so much criticism from the outside world. Yeah, I mean, a man wants his female partner to be a safe place for him, just as she does him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're criticizing a man who already feels criticized in the world, he's going to tune you out, you know?
Mm.
And if he's passive himself, he's going to tell you he's going to do things for you and never get them done as a way of being aggressive. So, what women can do is learn, one, to acknowledge men for what they do and the effect that has on them in their lives. And to ask directly for what they want in a soft, loving tone, and know that he doesn't have to give it to you.
Mm.
Asking is vulnerable because you don't know if you're going to get it. But I can tell you that complaining doesn't work. And I know why women complain. I mean, we have good reason in some cases. So, for example, if a man has really low confidence and he feels criticized, even though you're not criticizing him, he'll even take the things you're asking for to be a criticism, right? So sometimes it's not the woman's fault. And then when he doesn't hear her, or he says, yeah, honey, I'll do that, and has no intention of doing it, she feels disrespected. And so she gets louder and louder to the point of screaming at him. And sometimes it has to do with this miscommunication around the way we handle things. So, you might say to your partner, hey, would you cut those weeds? Let's say that's what he does. That's one of the jobs he does around the house.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, yeah, I'll do that. And as a woman, you're thinking, well, he'll probably do that today or in the next couple of days, right?
Mm.
And I've asked enough men about this to know that what they do is they put it in the order of importance. So let's say they have like 8 things that are more important than that. It goes down to number 9.
Mm.
And so that could be 2 weeks out, like fix the leak or whatever the thing is. And then the woman gets really upset because she feels like you don't care about what I care about and you promised me something when in fact he never promised when he would do it.
So it sounds like, going back to being direct, asking for what you want. And is it helpful to ask for a timeline, or is that micromanaging?
I think it is, but you have to do it carefully. So I would say something like, I know you probably have a lot of things on your list. Would you mind saying when you think it could get done? So I'm not, micromanaging you or looking for it to be done. Because me, I'd like it done today. And this way, you're having a respectful conversation about his time. You've got these other things. Just let me know where you think it might fit, ideally sooner rather than later.
Gosh, I know this has been a very short conversation, comparatively speaking, to all that you know and have to share, but there's so many pieces that I see myself being reminded of and being able to put into action. And I'm wondering, for somebody who may have just jumped in towards the end of the conversation, what's one thing you would want somebody to walk away with?
Well, I'll speak to the men and say, if you want a woman to respect you, you have to be self-respecting. We always teach people how to treat us, period. And, if you're with a narcissist, of course, that's going to be different. And, when you realize that you're self-respecting, you can't get that respect from your partner, you have to walk away. But men have to employ behaviors that demonstrate self-respect in order to get respect, like taking care of yourself. You know, when you don't take care of yourself, body, mind, heart, then a woman feels a certain responsibility for you. She's not going to respect you. If she has to tell you, you know, eat your vegetables and things like that, then she takes on a mothering energy, which is disrespectful of your masculinity. If you don't honor what you want and need, then she's going to tell you what you want and need. It's just how it's going to go. If you don't confront the things that need to be confronted, you know, they're just going to increasingly plague the way that you relate to each other. Confrontation is so important for men, not in the sense of, you know, attacking your partner, but just being clear about what's working for you, what isn't working for you, where you want to take the relationship. You know, when you bring a vision, there's a certain confrontation to that too, because you're looking to change the status quo. So I think it's, you know, for the men listening, I would say really assess how self-respecting you are in these areas. And as you slowly start to improve that, I think you'll notice that if you're with a partner, her respect for you will grow.
So good. Oh my goodness. So Karen, I know that you are working on your second book, and I'm curious if someone wants to find out more about you, where would they look?
Well, you could go to my website, KarenBrodyCoaching.com. I have a free book on there that a lot of men really like because it highlights the kind of hidden mistakes men make sexually with women that turn women off and how to turn those around. And it's called Reignite Her Passion. What's great is it's just 23 pages, but it's really potent and it highlights these mistakes. And I also invite your listeners to get my book, Open Her, which they can find on Amazon.
Which I highly recommend. And again, everything will be in the show notes. But if you are an audio person, you get to hear, again, KarenBrodyCoaching.com. And thank you so much for your time today. I so appreciate it. And I'm thrilled to get to share you and your wisdom with my listeners. And if you're listening and you want to help do your part in spreading better sex and love around the world, please like, subscribe, and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Thank you again, Karen. And to the listeners, we'll hear you next week. Thanks so much.